Well, Boredar or Renowned are every pony. This is BronyDan. It's not original, but hey, you try coming up originality these days. Well, as you can tell by the hat, it's of course that cherished time of year, Christmas. A time of peace and goodwill to all man. A time when you don't have to feel bad about stuffing your face with food. And of course, that most cherished of all traditions. A review of another Christmas Carol adaptation. Now, I know many of you are going, oh, for God's sake, what's the point? We already know the story of A Christmas Carol. It's been shoved down our throats so much that we're practically shitting out the novel itself at this point. Yes, I will admit this story has been adapted millions of times before, and many of them are great ones. Whether it's the Alistair Sim version, the George C. Scott version, the Mickey Mouse version, or even the Muppet version, everybody has that adaptation that makes them say, yes, that is A Christmas Carol. But today, we're going to be looking at a Christmas Carol adaptation that many people don't know about. And probably for good reason. This is the 2001 animated adaptation called Christmas Carol, the Movie. And right there we have the first notable change. Why do they feel the need to call it Christmas Carol, the Movie? Was it to make it stand out amongst the others? If so, then it doesn't really work because it just sounds like the movie is going to be about an actual Christmas Carol. We start off like most adaptations in Victoria, London in 1843 where we see...
Oh, Miss Bell.
There now.
Miss Bell? Wait, you mean that's Belle? The fiancée that left Scrooge in the past? Yeah, apparently in this version, Belle, voiced by Kate Winslet, is actually a nurse who works at a hospital, but the head doctor is taken away to jail for being unable to pay his debts, and all the financial decisions at the hospital have been moved from their previous benefactor to, of course, Ebenezer Scrooge, voiced by Simon Callow.
A sorry state of affairs, I'm afraid to say.
Nothing, sir, that cannot be resolved. Good day.
Now, in some versions of this adaptation, there are actually live-action sequences where Simon Callow is actually playing Charles Dickens, telling the story to a theatre audience. I actually find this quite ironic, seeing as how 4 years later Callow would again play Dickens in the first series of Doctor Who, and in the episode The Unquiet Dead. However, here, he doesn't have to deal with ghosts made out of gas. She writes a letter to Scrooge, unaware that Scrooge was the one who had the Doctor and several others arrested with the help of his henchman. Yes, he has a henchman in this version. Old Joe, voiced by Robert Llewellyn.
Why don't we drop the defensive shields?
A superlative suggestion, sir, with just two minor flaws. One, we don't have any defensive shields. And two, we don't have any defensive shields. Now, I realize that technically speaking, that's only one flaw, but I thought it was such a big one, it was worth mentioning twice.
Yeah, it's Crichton from Red Dwarf. Why does this guy always find himself working with such smegheads? Yeah, Scrooge is much more of a bastard in this one. In the original, he was just a miser who cared more for profit than goodwill. But here, he's deliberately having innocent people arrested just because they are unable to pay him with the help of corrupt cops. You're supposed to be a tight-fisted businessman, not a mafia boss. She leaves the letter in the hands of Scrooge's clerk, Bob Cratchit. Are you sure you want to do business with a man who has a mouse for an assistant?
Yes, my assistant.
Yes, this is one of those films where it seemed to be mandatory for a main character to have a cute fuzzy sidekick with him, even if there is no point for the fuzzy sidekick to exist. Well, Cratchit fails to give Scrooge the message as he heads off for home, with Scrooge telling him that he needs to be in extra early the day after Christmas. But before Scrooge himself can leave... Whoa, hang on, what's happening?
Oh, hear me, Ebenezer. Money? Is it really you, Money?
Yeah, Yeah, sure, let's just jump straight into Marley's ghost.
Little has changed in these chambers since my departure.
And he's voiced by Nicolas Cage. What? First of all, this literally comes right the fuck out of nowhere. In the novel and every other adaptation, Jacob Marley's appearance was a gradual build-up, from the mentioning of his death, the door knocker, the mantelpiece, so that when he did show up, you felt just as terrified in his presence as Scrooge does. Here, though, there's none of that, and it just goes by so quickly. Marley just shows up and says, "Oh, hey, Ebenezer, just to let you know there are 3 ghosts coming to haunt you. Bye!" And that's it! Look, if you want to do your own spin on the story, fine, but at least have an understanding of pacing, placement, and how you present one of the most crucial elements of the story. So after that encounter, Scrooge heads off home and...
Mend your ways.
Marley!
We've already seen Marley appear! The shock and creepiness of this scene is now non-existent. Anyway, he goes inside, and I'm starting to notice that Scrooge's scarf changes length when he takes it off. Look back at scenes when he's wearing it. It looks like it's the length of Tom Baker's scarf. Do you see what I mean? I fucking love this thing. Anyway, you know what happens next. Scrooge goes to bed and is visited by the ghost of Christmas past, who in this version seems to have an interesting design where she switches from young to old. She takes Scrooge and the mice, yes, the mice are still here, to the past where we see the usual things. We see him at school, his time as an apprentice, to Fezziwig, and his breakup with Belle. But even here, slight differences have been made to the story that could piss off a hardcore fan.
Father was a difficult man. Harsh, but just. I did not understand back then. It's sometimes hard to see the reason.
You should know the reason. It was because your father blames you for the death of your mother. You know, as much as a Charles Dickens aficionado Simon Callow is, you would think he would stop right here and go, "No, wait, no, this is wrong. You fucked up." Oh, and it turns out that Belle was present at every single one of those moments in Scrooge's life. Yep, as you might have begun to notice, Belle is actually one of the main focuses of this story, and Scrooge is merely just a byproduct to help her get the hospital back together, rather than him being an actual character. I'm also wondering how long exactly has it been since Scrooge and Belle have seen each other in this version. I mean, I always imagined Scrooge to be in his 60s or 70s, but in this version, it looks more like he's in his 40s or at the very least early 50s, so it can't be that long. Well, of course, Scrooge arrives back at his bedroom in time for the arrival of the next spirit, the ghost of Christmas Present, voiced by Michael Gambon.
I come to teach you joy. Joy that makes a banquet out of a simple meal. Joy, Mr. Scrooge, that comes from sharing. Sharing willingly and with love.
You know, I shouldn't be so pissed off at the mice are in this adaptation because they don't do anything. But then I realised that is why they're pissing me off. They're completely useless to the story. They're just there to look cute for the kids. So the spirit takes Scrooge down what I can only describe as an acid trip.
Let me take you down, 'cause I'm going to Strawberry Field. Nothing is real.
As we are shown the homes of Scrooge's nephew, Fred and Bob Cratchit, and Scrooge is shown that even though people may not like him, they still wish him a Merry Christmas.
If you don't mind, I'd rather have the pudding. Enough of that dreadful skinflint. Come.
Or not, since we need to keep driving it in that Scrooge is so despised by everyone that nobody would even give him the time of day. So now the present has been so rushed, the spirit disappears and we see the arrival of the ghost of Christmas future. And I have to say, this is a cool design for the character. He still has the traditional long black cloak, but it makes me think like he's made out of the fog. And how the visions of Tiny Tim's death and Joe's dealings are all fading in and out of the black voids. They do look quite interesting, like how the future isn't always so clear. That's actually a very clever idea.
I don't know to whom our debts will be transferred, but whoever it is, surely he won't be as cruel as Ebenezer Scrooge. La, 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 la.
Well, anyway, Scrooge realizes that this all revolves around him as he begs for forgiveness. He wakes up overjoyed that he and the mice are alive. They did jack shit! And thus goes to change his ways. He severs ties with Joe's, with a spontaneous song coming out of nowhere from Belle, gets back together with Belle to help the hospital, and makes Bob Cratchit a partner in the business.
Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all and infinitely more. He kept Christmas in his heart all through the year and knew how to keep it well. And to Tiny Tim, he did not cry. He was a second father.
Wait, that's it? You're just ending it on him saying that he became a second father to Tiny Tim? No mention of the classic line, and so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone! Hang on, there wasn't even a scene where he makes amends with his nephew! Good God, you can't even end your adaptation properly! I can now understand why no one talks about this adaptation much. It does follow the basic summary of the original book, but small changes like having Belle be one of the driving forces for Scrooge and the inclusion of the mice to entertain the children as well just don't sit well with me. The animation at some point seems stoic and quite dark in places, so you struggle to actually make things out. Plus, with the way the pacing of this goes, it just seems really dull. Do I think it's the worst adaptation of the story? I wouldn't say so, but when in comparison to other versions, this one is definitely near the bottom. This is BronyDan saying, Merry Christmas everyone, have a happy holidays and a happy new year to you. See you all in 2016.